Guys, welcome to another episode of the Meaning of Podcast. This is the podcast where we get into the deeper meaning of your favorite film directors working in Hollywood. I'm Ace.
This is RB3.
And today we're talking about the one and only Nebraska man himself, Alexander Payne. But before we do, we want to be reading your comments from last week's episode. And last week, we did an episode on Guillermo del Toro, also known as Willie the Bull, as our friend JT would say. Which I think is hysterical. Yeah. I still think it's funny. But Guillermo has obviously Shape of Water coming out, which RB3 and I had the privilege of watching.
Yeah, great
film. But we want to take some of your comments and see what you guys think of Guillermo. This comment is from Zach Hayes. He says, from the trailers, I cannot wait to see Shape of Water this week, but I can't help but think of the BioShock games in some aspects while watching the trailer. So now I want to see a BioShock film from him. Any games you guys want to see adapted as a film besides Shadow of Colossus? Thanks for the video, and I can't wait to see who's next. Thank you, Zach. Any video game that you want to see adapted into a movie? RB3.
That's a good question. I mean, to me, there's no point in adapting something that's like super cinematic into a movie, because you could watch the cutscenes, from the game. Why do you want to see that into a movie? I don't know. So I'd kind of want to see something more open concept. I mean, I've always kind of thought, well, somebody just pulled the trigger on like a Mario Kart video game, you know what I mean? Yeah. Just because you could build such a weird story around that, I think it could be really fun, animated, and so I don't know. And as far as live action, I mean, BioShock is cool. I've actually never played it myself. I've watched people like play it, but I mean, it's a cool story, cool setup, and I guess like the production design of The Shape of Water kind of resembles a little bit of the stuff in BioShock. But if you watch the movie, it's very different tonically than what the BioShock actual game is. But are there any ones that you want to see adapted into
man, it's so tough because I feel like a lot of people don't give credit enough. I was watching the Video Game Awards, which were on Friday, I think.
Yeah.
I was watching a little bit of it, but a lot of people don't give credit to those guys behind video games. Like, they really put in a lot of effort into making basically an actual movie inside a video game and making a narrative. There was like a category called like Best Narrative. Mm-hmm. Like that was such a good title for a category, because there's a difference between like Best Video Game and Best Narrative, because narrative is like something that you're watching it. You're playing a video game, but you're also interested in the story. I remember when I was younger and I played video games that had some stories, and sometimes I was just like, skip story, go back to shooting people. Like sometimes that was my thought process. But now in this new era of like these like theatrical video games that create basically movies in itself, that you can just literally put your controller down and watch it and then pick it back up when it's time to play. That's they're basically making movies. A lot of credit to those video game creators, because they're basically making their own theatrical film. So it's tough. I mean, obviously you have the usual like Uncharted, what was The Last of Us is another one that people always bring up. Those games would be like interesting to see adapted. I think the video game worlds create such a different atmosphere. It's like it's not the same obviously, but it's similar to adapting anime to live action, where I feel like anime gives you so much more time and it gives you so much of a world, because the anime part, like 50% of what makes an anime great is establishing and creating a world. And that's like the number one thing, is like making sure, what are the rules in this world, what can you do in this world. And sometimes film, although it seems to be the best route to do things, might be limiting the creativity of an anime or a video game, right?
Well, definitely with video games, because the whole point of video games is to be interactive.
Exactly.
Like you're guiding yourself on,
and you're able to do things that you could probably not do in film, basically, is what I'm saying. Like, let's say the new PS4 game that came out that I think is insane. I think it's called Shadow of Horizon. Have you seen that one?
No, I haven't, no.
Oh my gosh, it's amazing. Like, if I had a choice, I would say that. Mm-hmm. I want to see that in a movie. But then again, I think about it and I'm like, yeah, but the whole point of the game is that you can explore this world and you could go on different adventures and side adventures. And part of that thing that makes that game so great is the beauty of being able to explore, that I feel like if you do it in film, unless you put like a $200 million budget behind it, it's not going to be as spectacular as it is in the video game. Well, it's tough to do. If I had a choice, I would take a video game that is not as theatrical. And to make it theatrical, because why take a theatrical, beautiful game and then limit it in a movie? Because in a movie, you're like, oh, the game's better because it's more grand in scale.
Right.
I would take a story in a video game, whatever that might be, and make that huge in scale.
100%. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, there's a lot of worlds in video games, like the Zelda games and the
you imagine a Zelda game. It's never gonna live up to Zelda. It's just never gonna live up to those amazing, beautiful adventures that you can go on.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe, but you would have to put in a ton of money, a ton of time and effort. And it's just like, I feel like if you take something smaller, like a very personal, small video game story, then maybe that'll be better. But it's tough, man. It really is tough.
If they were to go like the Lord of the Rings route or something with that kind of stuff, that'd be interesting to see though. But I guess it depends on.
I have one.
Yeah.
I have one. Resident Evil. I want to see a Resident Evil, like the type of stuff you get, not the crazy over the top, like tongue-in-cheek action Resident Evils we have, but an actual one based on the game. That I think that would be interesting, where you have a little bit more focus on the source material. Because Resident Evil now is like regarded as like a beautiful, well-told story. Whereas like, when the Mila Jovovich movies were coming out, it was just a silly zombie movie. But now they can make it like a serious zombie story. Right.
Now, I mean, I hope the video game world opens up a little more to movie adaptations, but I mean, I just kind of like the idea of video games being video, especially now that we're seeing games that are. I do too. Yeah, especially now we're seeing games that are doing the whole like multiple endings. Like some games have like 100 different storylines based on the choices you make, something like that. So I love seeing that, and I just think let the movies be the movies and let the games be the games. And if you want to buy the games and purchase the games and play them and interact with them, I say do that. But
yeah. A lot of it too is like gamers want to be represented in film too.
Yeah, well,
but then again, the video game industry is making a ton of money.
Oh yeah, I remember when GTA 5 came out, man.
Yeah,
I couldn't buy that for weeks.
Yeah,
weeks. Because it was just sold out everywhere.
I'm kind of with you. I feel like video games are great because they're video games, and some of the theatricality of it is great because it's inside of a video game. So I don't know. We'll have to find out and see what that is. But I kind of want to hear your thoughts on his first part of the question, Shape of Water. Just general thoughts. Obviously, we won't spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it because we don't spoil things.
Yeah.
But just I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it because we saw it together last week. So
yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. I think it had. It was doing something really interesting. It's the same thing in all the Guillermo del Toro movies, taking fantasy stories and making them human, bring them into the real world, and how is that represented? So I think it did it really well. I think there's one of the better films in Guillermo del Toro's filmography. I do think that there is a lot of like, oh, Hollywood, we love old movies, musicals, it's like, okay, I get it. You know what I mean? I don't have to see. You don't have to keep cutting back to the movie theater downstairs or the whatever, them watching something on the television. I don't know. That to me that started to become a little heavy.
That took you out of the movie?
Yeah. Okay. And
well, what if he's really a fan of those movies? And
I love that I love that he's a fan of that.
Yeah, because he really is. Like Guillermo del Toro is like a film buff.
Oh, definitely. Film buff. There's no denying that. And then even when we were talking about last week, all the references to other movies and other films and other pieces of art in his movies. So he's very much he consumes a lot of art and all that stuff, and I appreciate that. I just think for the subject material that we have here, this like really great and interesting story about this aqua creature who could represent something deeper and like this cycle of society and all the social implications that they were going for was like really strong, hitting hard. And Michael Shannon was just such a great villain.
Michael Shannon's amazing.
Yeah,
he's incredible in that movie. I was telling you after we saw the movie, I'm like, dude, I forget how good Michael Shannon is. He's one of the best actors working today.
Yeah,
he's so freaking good.
Yeah,
like, he kills me in every scene.
Yeah,
so good.
And it's the dynamic. Because you get a visit into his like home life and you see like, oh, this is where a guy like this could start going crazy. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of great stuff they're going into. But that being said, it's like when they have to cut away to like them watching like Shirley Temple or whatever, it's like, what am I doing? But That's such a small point. It's a great movie. It probably will make like my top 10 list or something.
Okay.
I'm not sure, but to me, it's like, yeah, we have to pander to Oscar voters and the 80-year-olds and the people who vote for the Academy Awards, just to make sure they like this movie too. So,
got you. You felt like that was a little bit of pandering towards
Yeah.
them?
Oh,
okay.
Definitely. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I see how that is. I feel like to me, I still think the best part of the movie is the performances.
Yeah. Sally Hawkins
is great. Richard Jenkins is so freaking good. I had to like turn to you and turn to some of my friends and be like, yo, that guy's amazing. Like, where did he come from? And he's like been acting forever. Michael Shannon, obviously. Like, to me, everyone gave such great performances and really well done, and the world was really well established. I think that's the best I got out of it, was that kind of whole aspect of it going on. Yeah. And a lot of it too is the production design.
Oh yeah. Well, I definitely think when you talking about production design, this is like the best I think I've seen pretty much all year, honestly.
Blade Runner 2049? What?
Come on, man.
Blade Runner 2049? I'm talking production design, dude. Like, leave your bias at home. I'm talking production design.
Good production.
You can't tell me it didn't have great production design in 2049.
90% of the sets were empty. That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say.
Man. But the production design was incredible in 2049. It was so good.
You watch the original Blade Runner, and it's so different in terms of production design. You know what I mean?
Disagree. I totally disagree.
When you watch a Ridley Scott movie, or any Ridley Scott movie, the frame always has like a million things happening.
Sure.
And within it.
Sure.
And wait, hold up. I keep talking like negatively about Blade Runner 2049. I think it's a good movie.
Well, it's a great movie.
When you watch that movie, though, the way like the sets are structured up is very like hollow, very shallow, very like one pointed light pointing in somebody's face, and then that's pretty much it. Blank walls everywhere. No, it's not an insult, but that's where I stand on that. But for something like The Shape of Water, that matters a lot, right? The way the sets are constructed here, because it's a period piece and it's a sci-fi movie.
Sure.
So it kind of has to balance toe this line of making sure the aesthetics of the era are accurate and make sure that's a piece of the film, but also making sure that the sci-fi elements shine out too, and also having that relate to the aesthetics of the time, the 1940s, 1950s era of science fiction that they're trying to portray in that too. So, so to me this is like the.
You think it takes the cake for production design?
Yeah.
All right.
And I'm not mad at Blade Runner 2049.
I think Blade Runner 2049 was
By the
awesome.
way, I think that it does have great production design. It just, to me, again,
you
as
think
a
Shape
Blade
of Water's
Runner,
better.
as Shape of Water is better, and I like the
original Blade Runner
too much. Yeah,
it does have great production design. That's part of what makes it a great movie. Let's jump over to Alexander Payne. Now, Alexander Payne, the reason why we're talking about him this week is because he has a movie coming out called Downsizing, starring Matt Damon and SNL. What's her name?
Kristen
Wiig. I'm sorry. I should know that. That's my bad.
No, I literally, as you were thinking, I was just thinking inside.
I was going to say Kristen Chenoweth. That's not it.
I was going to say like
Kate McKinnon. No, Kristen Wiig's great. I like Kristen Wiig a lot. She was also in Mother.
Right.
She has a small scene in Mother. I was watching Variety does a great series called Actors on Actors, where actors interview actors, and they had a Kristen Wiig and Saoirse Ronan one.
Oh, really?
And Saoirse Ronan obviously isn't one of my favorites this year, which is Lady Bird.
Right.
And but Kristen Wiig, she talked about her role in Mother a little bit, and I was like, oh yeah, she was in Mother for like a short scenes. But anyways, guys, Alexander Payne is a director you could say he's another like Oscar favorite. The Academy likes him a lot. They like what he goes for, even though his movies can be hit or miss for me personally. I still feel like he has a lot to say in his movies, and that's why we wanted to do an episode on him. And we're going to do it the usual way just because he doesn't have too many films. We're going to probably go in order of release. And that will kick things off with Citizen Ruth.
Right.
Starring Laura Dern, who you might know from The Last Jedi. Instead of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
You might know her from The Last Jedi. But Laura Dern is in this movie. And this movie is actually kind of, I think it's 94, 96. Let me verify.
It's very early
96.
96.
So it came out in 1996. And it's literally all about abortion. I mean, obviously it's about the character of Laura Dern and how she's kind of like I wouldn't say crazy, but kind of like down on her luck. I mean,
she's a psychopath.
She's
she is. She's a drug addict. She's addicted to huffing paint, and she's
a huffer.
Huffer. Yeah,
as the kids would call it.
So she's just a train wreck, and like her whole life, she has 4 kids, and she doesn't take care of them.
So basically, that's the whole premise of the movie, right? Is that she's so down that. Is it worth raising a child when it's being when it's being birthed by this train wreck of a woman, right? That kind of whole mentality, and then it becomes like a pro-life or pro-choice kind of movement. It's interesting because would you say this is his most political film? Because he does politics a lot in his movies, but in that. Not necessarily politics in a sense of like right or left. He just does it in a different kind of way, specifically with election. But this one is a very like just straight up political in the sense of like what is pro-life, pro-choice.
Well, they have. I mean, it's literally like they're at war, right? There's the pro-life people who are all the church and played by that one dude from that '70s show. I can't remember his name, but he's my favorite part of this movie. And they have that whole area where they're taking her in, they're taking care of her, and she's having a good life with them, and she's becoming
Kurtwood Smith.
Yeah, that guy. Yeah, he's great.
He's great. Yeah.
And meanwhile on the other side, there's this whole pro-choice movement that one of the characters was a undercover spy in the church and ends up kidnapping Ruth and like all this like crazy stuff, and it becomes like an actual like covert war. And I think what's so interesting about this movie to me is that when you watch or when you look at any like specific kind of civil rights movement in America, it takes so much preparation and so much like stuff to people to get behind it, frankly, because and the reason why is because they have to make sure they're choosing the right people. And having somebody as troubled as Ruth being like the center of this big controversy, you got people offering money, you got like news reporters like following her, like this big whole setup outside of the house and whatnot. So it's like, it really is like she's like her personal issues have become like globalized on a much larger scale, like where everybody has to know her story and everybody is involved in it, even to the point where her actual choice and her actual opinion just stops mattering. You know what I mean? And it's very scaring in this way that it kind of talks about how the pro-choice people are honestly just as bad as the pro-life people, right? Sure. They're just as militant. They're just as crazy and psychopathic. They exercise as much like violence and like force for handedness like on her as the pro-life people do. So it's interesting.
What do you think? What side it takes in the movie? By the end of the movie, obviously at the beginning, it's probably telling you something else.
Yeah, I think they button up it at the very last scene of this movie. I don't think it has a side. I think it's just saying both are stupid. You know what I mean?
It's like basically saying the political campaigns on each movement is kind of.
Yeah, exactly. And
crazy.
There's that great. The scene. The movie ends with that like long tracking shot of the people on the pro-choice like having all the security guards behind the fences is there, and then on the other side there's the group of the churchgoers and the pro-life people, and she's just literally walking right by them, and nobody notices. like there's this entire war centered around her case and her struggle, and she just walks right by and then just runs off with her money. You know what I mean? So that's the most telling sign of what this movie's about to me. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, at the end of the day, they don't care about the individual. There's no care about the choices or whatever, or the actual life or the baby being born. Everybody's just trying to push their own agenda.
Sure.
So
it's more of the concept and the idea than the actual execution of it.
Right.
Where you don't care if the person is actually doing it if you're not involved in it. But when you suddenly become involved with your own agenda, it's when you start to kind of make it a bigger issue than the person itself.
Right. But I think there's some, they do go pretty hard on the pro-life people, even to the effect of having the president of the Baby Savers organization come out.
Which is the stupidest name ever.
Yeah, the Baby Savers. Yeah, and they call like a national alert, and their national chairperson flies in. And lo and behold, when the national chairperson flies in, he has like a little boy with him, like massaging him at all times, or like his personal assistant. It's like, whoa, they're really going for like that whole angle of what a lot of the stereotypes of
pro-life.
Yeah, pro-life, like Bible bearing, like
Bible thumpers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but at the end of the day, it's very much her story, though.
Sure.
And especially, the film. Spoiler alert. Obviously, I told you the ending, but there's also the whole fact that it ends with her also having a miscarriage. So at the end of the day, there wasn't a choice to, even for her to even have, you know what I mean? Like, everything was just working outside of her hands. But she's just trying to get it for her own personal gain, So, and she's dealing with the conflict of being, wanting to have a baby, but also not being well fit to be a mother. So
sure. Do you feel like your own personal opinion of this film? Anyone? I'm talking about people listening right now or people watching right now. You, me, anyone who watches this movie having their own personal idea on this extremely like delicate topic, to say the least, because this is like the most freaking crazy topic still today, in the sense of like, even like, look at the Senate race, which obviously by now it's happening right now, so we'll probably have a winner between Roy Moore and Doug Jones in Alabama.
All right.
But I think it takes place on right now. Sorry, breaking news right now.
Right.
Whatever happens today, but based on what happens today in that Senate race, the special election that's taking place, how much of it comes down to even just this issue? The fact, do you feel like this issue, seeing it through your lens, seeing this movie through your lens, do you have your own opinion coming into it? Does it change your opinion going out of it? Does it make you feel any other way? Do you feel like your own opinion changes your perception of this movie?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely plays a part in it.
Because I'm sure you have a side, right?
Right.
Everyone probably has a side on this issue.
Right. I mean, I'm a pretty liberal dude, so like, of course.
Well, I'm in a podcast, bro. Yo, that's my. I did not know. This is breaking news. This is breaking news for me, dude. Right. What the hell, dude? You never told me this.
Yeah, it's not like I didn't call Batman a Republican. I didn't say that. But no,
Batman.
Yeah, you remember on the Zack
Snyder
episode? You remember?
What you got against Batman, bro?
Hey, Batman's
my brother, man.
And Batman v Superman, he's a Republican.
Yeah. That's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
I love Batman. Don't you talk about Batman?
No, I mean, Batman most of the time is cool. I'm just playing. Go ahead. No, I mean, I love.
Do you feel like?
You're definitely If you have personal politics going in, your opinion is going to be a little flipped on that. But I think
if you were a pro-lifer watching this, do you feel like this is like, well, that's a little, you're kind of making fun of us, and you're kind of,
well, you know what?
That's not how we are.
I think they give that side a lot of credit too, though.
Sure.
Like the whole opening act of that film takes place with her hanging out with the pro-life family, with the old dude and the people who like basically bring her in right after jail. And I think by doing that, you get a lot of sympathy for their side. Like, when she starts singing the Jesus songs with them and she's spending time with this family, you're kind of becoming attached to that. And when she leaves, it almost kind of hurts you as much as it hurt them.
Sure.
So
do you feel like comparing this movie to something like, obviously it's a stretch, but Juno?
Right.
Do you feel like what description is the most accurate? Do you feel like this one is a little bit more over the top, or Juno is a little bit more over the top?
Yeah, well, I think they're about different things, right? I mean,
sure.
I think Juno is more about.
But when it comes down to this issue specifically,
with the abortion, I mean, definitely. I think here is definitely more. I mean, I don't think we'll ever see. Probably in 2017 we could see something like this happening, right? Where there's a big war literally brewing between like two separate agendas.
We're seeing this in a lot of different issues, though, right? Because you could say something like this with Colin Kaepernick or something like that.
Yeah,
he's the face of a movement,
right?
Or other issues that might come up.
Well, even going back to the civil rights thing, when the Montgomery bus boycott was being organized, a lot of people there's this misconception that Rosa Parks just kind of sat on the bus and then didn't want to get up, and that was and everything just triggered that. Well, no, it was actually months and months and months of planning going into that. So when she made that move, she had already a big backing behind her, big money. The NAACP was supporting the movement. So there was and obviously the church systems and whatnot. So there's obviously a campaign already brewing. So that's kind of what's needed in order to get that stuff going on. So
sure.
Picking the right face for that like what is
really
extremely important.
Yeah.
So that's why this movie is so fascinating, because the face they picked
is like the wrong face.
Right. She's a drug addict. She has a lot of problems. I mean, she's a very troubled character. But I think the beauty about Alexander Payne's filmmaking is that even though she's so troubled, you do get you do feel some sincerity to her. You do get the love towards her. You know what I mean? You see her for vulnerabilities. You see that she actually does want to get better. But she's just having this huge problem, which is true. So that's true for a lot of people, frankly. And, I think Alexander Payne, being somebody who's from the Midwest, he writes a lot of his movies set in the Midwest and give these characters a lot of life in the Midwest, whereas a lot of filmmakers would just be like making fun of them, especially like the Coen brothers, right? If we talk about Coen brothers movies, Coen brothers are always making fun of like the Midwest mentality and attitude, right? But in his movies, he's just kind of letting his characters live and breathe and have their own life, and he doesn't judge them for it, and he feels good about showing the pluses and negatives of both sides.
Got you.
Yeah, so
cool,
that's
man.
ultimately where I land on Citizen Roof.
Cool. Let's move on to Election, which is
another political theme.
It is a little political in the most basic sense of like politics in general.
Right.
But yeah, this is another one. Actually takes place in Nebraska, which is kind of funny because that's where he's from. And this one's an interesting one for me because rewatching this one, because it's been a while since I saw it the first time. Right. It really, I mean, personally, it really feels like there's not really a likable character in this movie. Because even, like, Matthew Broderick is one of the leads, probably not the lead in the movie, but even he does some stuff that I'm like, ah. And then obviously Tracy Flick, played by Reese Witherspoon, is another one she's like the stereotypical, like, super ambitious, super like teacher's pet kind of person. Mm-hmm. And she almost to a fault, right, where she's kind of annoying throughout the whole movie. The only person I kind of liked was the dumb jock played by Chris Klein. Yeah. And I was like, you're dumb, but I like you, man.
Right.
And
right.
It's one of those movies though that it basically is about the midlife crisis. Of Matthew Broderick. And how seeing a student like Tracy Flick just is like two times coming intersecting, right, where it's like my point in my life with my wife and my career and all this, and her point in her life come crashing together in the sense of like just right when I'm feeling super, those moments when you're just like in a bad mood and you're just really annoyed by everything, and then one person just starts like yapping or something and you're like, I usually let it go, but not today, man. Screw you. He's the type of person, like in the beginning of the film, he would let it go. Remember, like when she's like raising her hand and he's like, fine, Tracy, go ahead and stuff like that. But now he's like, F Tracy, I don't give a crap, because he's in such a sour mood. And also because she kind of like messed up his personal connection. He didn't really blame her for the relationship he had with his best friend teacher. Yeah. Because that's what the whole movie starts on, right? Is the relationship between a student and a teacher, which obviously is creepy as hell. And does not hold up well in 2017. But it's one of those things where it's like his midlife crisis mixed with her crazy over-the-top ambition and the student election come crashing to a halt. It's a really well done movie, but it's one of those movies that it's just like it's hard to get through sometimes, because I feel like, man, I hate every character in this movie.
I mean, I agree with like in I can't remember the character's name, but he's somebody, the jock dude who was
Paul.
Paul, he's good. And the Tammy character, Tammy's somebody who you relate to too, pretty much. I mean, there's obvious parallels that you can make with this film that were happening, the kind of the references, the political atmosphere that we're living in today, right?
Sure.
And I think when writing this movie, Alexander Payne was kind of channeling the growing absurdity that was coming with these election cycles, right?
This was 99, I think?
99, yeah. So
this is right before the Gore and Bush, right?
Right before Gore and Bush, and this was like when it's like at the heat of like when they were about to like impeach like Bill Clinton, right, for the whole Monica Lewinsky scandal, and they even have that like nice like nod to it at the end, right? When Tracy's like walking out of the limo with the politician.
Oh yeah.
Like right down the street from the White House. So I think that's really where a lot of this movie like still plays and is still relevant.
Sure.
Especially now that we live in a lot of times a three party kind of growing, movement. You know what I mean? And especially somebody like Tracy, who just frankly, kind of, if you're relating it to modern politics, it's kind of like the Hillary Clinton, in the way that, it's like
I could see that
her personality just chills, like just feels unauthentic and like super
annoying.
Annoying. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like literally vote for the other person just to spite Tracy.
Right. Exactly. And again, that's where,
that's kind of like right now.
Right.
People are like, I just hate Hillary Clinton. And I'm like, oh yeah, she's kind of annoying.
yeah. And that's where somebody like Tammy comes in.
Yeah.
And then like, she's kind of like the off the wall candidate.
Sure.
Of course, she's not like as like obnoxious as like Trump or anything.
No, she's not insane.
Yeah, but she does have that like underdog, like, oh, fuck the system, fuck this, like all that, and she's playing on that, and that's what gives her a lot of success.
Success.
Yeah. And then meanwhile, you have the third party guy. A lot of people, again, comparing that to like the Bernie of the, but a lot, again, this is in 1999 where a third party candidate was always just kind of a joke. Yeah. And in this movie, this guy is just pretty much a joke, right?
Sure.
He's running on the promise of having the carnivals have real roller coasters and all of like these like insane little like things that he wants, because he's just thinking about himself and he's thinking about the people, I guess.
Sure.
So of course it's going to be a little bit more it's going to be a little more spiteful towards that guy, and it's going to be a little more spiteful towards like the Tracy character,
yeah.
Right?
But it really centers around Matthew, though.
Yeah, like it's really his movie, and it's it's Ferris Bueller kind of just growing up, right? Like he's the teacher. He's he's down on his luck. He's not having a great relationship with his wife. Mm-hmm. So every like you said, his whole life is just coming into turmoil. You know what I mean?
It really becomes one of those things where you see that in movies a lot, but the doing something over and over and the boredom of being stuck. Yeah. Where it's literally the definition of a midlife crisis. And he's just really at a point where he's like, what am I doing with my life right now? Like I'm doing the same thing over and over again, and I'm not really satisfied with what I'm at, with my wife, with my job. I'm 40 and I'm doing the same thing over and over. So it's him having to deal with this, and then the bad decisions that come down the line, right?
Right.
But that's exactly what his friend went through too, where it's the irony of like the friend kind of threw his life away to make a stupid decision and get in a relationship with a student, and that threw his life away. And now he's kind of like understanding where that emotion came from, where that bad decision brews from, because it brews for a while, and it stems from basically boredom and semi-depression of your life and your unsatisfaction with what you have, and you suddenly want to spice it up a little bit. So you're like, I'm gonna get an affair. So he does, and obviously that kind of ruins his marriage. And then from there, his job at school, his frustration with Tracy, and his like just annoyance. And it really is. It's so relatable, dude. Because there's certain moments in the movie when he sees her jumping around and smiling, and he's like, you know what? Screw you.
right.
When I'm like, I've been in those moments where I've known people like Tracy, and you're just like, oh, shut up, man. Yeah. Seriously, I just want to do something to spite you, even though you seem to be a decent person.
Yeah, and we don't have any indication that she's like a bad girl.
Like she's just annoying. She's not necessarily bad or evil. I mean, she's bad in the sense that she kind of like ripped down those posters.
Yeah, sabotage.
That. That's probably the baddest thing she did. Yeah. But other than that, she's not a bad person. We're just mainly annoyed by her.
Yeah,
and that's kind of what drives Matthew insane to like throw his life away, essentially, by cheating on his wife.
I know some people kind of say that a lot of the bad guys in this movie are like the women characters, right? Like people equate like Tammy's girlfriend being like her main antagonist.
That's a good point.
With of course Tracy, but even to the extent of Matthew Broderick's wife, just kind of kicking him out and just like dumping him. It's like seemingly all of the choices that the women make in this movie end up resulting in like the dudes losing out or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or just bad things happening.
Sure.
So I mean, there's that whole criticism. I mean, do you like?
No, not at all. Because to me, again, I was like, besides Tracy, because she's just annoying. But to me, I don't think his wife did anything bad necessarily.
Yeah.
I mean, he did something bad because he cheated on his wife instead of talking to her.
Yeah.
Like the whole time I was watching that scene, I was like, really? You can't just talk to your wife? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. To me, it's just common sense to not cheat on your spouse. Because that's something that you probably shouldn't do. And if you're thinking about doing it, maybe tell them, be like, hey, I'm kind of bored with this marriage. That's a little bit more honest than just being like, I'm not going to tell her and I'm going to go cheat on her with another woman.
Right.
That to me is just common sense.
Yeah. I think
I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely think the movie plays on like the compliancy of some of these people, right? Like,
sure.
Like they're not, everybody's like so in self-denial and like so passive aggressive that like not communicating is like the whole thing, right? Like even to the point where you start to see Broderick's character like kind of devolve and like, you know, go driving into like this cycle of madness. Like he, even in his narration, he still thinks he's the good guy.
Sure.
Like he still thinks all the way up until the end, like where we talked about her when Tracy's walking out of the limo with the politician.
Yeah.
Even him in his own head, when he's obviously just been through this whole thing, he's like, you know, she's not as good as me or something like that, right? Like, yeah, he has that line.
Well, he says, I forget it exactly, but he says something like, you know, I wonder where Tracy's at right now.
Yeah.
Trying to reach a goal and never really satisfied with her life.
Exactly, yeah.
Where she's never satisfied in the sense of like everything she does, no matter how great she thinks it might be, it's never satisfactory. Mm-hmm. Where it's never going to be enough for her, and it's always going to be an itch that she can't scratch or something that she can't accomplish,
right?
Because she's always trying to reach for something, and it's just emptiness,
right?
Which in a way he's kind of right. I mean, he's wrong and right at the same time, where it's like, yeah, but at least she's doing something, you could say, to counter that. But then you're like, yeah, I know people like that who are just like doing stuff constantly and they're just empty inside, mm-hmm. where they're just not really satisfied with the life they're living, right? Mm-hmm. Where as far as you can meet a guy who has a simple job, like, I don't know, working at a grocery store, and you might think, oh, poor that guy. But in reality, he's way happier than you are. Mm-hmm. Like that's a possibility too, where you could be this big, powerful dude and you kind of look down on people with simple jobs. But sometimes those simple jobs can make a pretty happy life.
Yeah.
And the people who are like in the high up and never satisfied. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what he says towards the end of the movie. But yeah, I know what you're saying.
Right, yeah. So yeah, I mean, this movie's great, obviously. It's one of the first MTV movies that was ever produced by Paramount, and probably one of their biggest ones. I was nominated for the Academy Award of Best Adapted Screenplay the year it came out too. Yeah, so very highly acclaimed, and you know, this is what kind of put a lot of these stars on the map. Reese Witherspoon obviously was put on the map a lot with this film. Alexander Payne obviously as a writer director coming out. You know, after this he has some other bigger movies that help make grow his status. But like Chris Klein, this was his first part.
Yeah.
He I heard the story that he recruited Chris Klein like out of the high school that they were filming at.
No way.
They filmed at a real Nebraskan high school.
Oh wow.
And they were just looking for like a mixture of like non-actors and actors. So
good for him.
Yeah. So he came.
I mean, he's a big dude, so he already has like that jock look because he's like a big freaking dude.
Yeah, and you know, obviously now then he went on to do American Pie, and then a few other things, and you know, became a legit, not a star, but an actor.
He became an actor.
Yeah,
good for him.
Yeah. So again, this is a movie that put a lot of people on the map.
Sure.
Put MTV movies on the map, and director, writer, stars. So I'm all for it, and it's probably to me is it's probably the most rewatchable of Alexander Payne's movies. You know, it's kind of because there's that narration, right? Like you're able to get a little bit more into the heads of these characters, and you know, a lot of times it's easy for the narration of movies just to kind of give you what the movie's about. But the narration here is more about like just giving you an extra layer, like an extra spice of what each of these characters are thinking. So
sure.
So I think ultimately, you know, of course, and they use like the freeze frames. It's most stylistic out of any Alexander Payne movie, definitely. But it, you know, is probably, I think, one of his more bigger commercial ones too. I mean, we're gonna talk about The Descendants in a little bit, but yeah. So this is a great motion picture.
Yeah, this is definitely one that because I've mentioned before that he's hit or miss for me. This is definitely a hit for me. Personally, and obviously there's a lot of other great things in the movie, like Tammy is funny and she has some moments in there
she's hilarious.
where her parents are like, you're going to Catholic school, and she's like, oh, damn, that's actually really good.
Yeah.
She's like, it's an all-girl school, and you're gonna hate it. And she's like, okay, cool. I mean, this is awesome.
Right.
But I thought that was kind of a funny moment.
And they had that moment with Chris Klein's character when he's like, Tracy, or somebody was like, Tracy ripped down all your posters. Like, oh, that seems like a really hateful thing to do. I hope she's all right. Stuff like that.
But don't you like? I like that guy.
Yeah,
just because he seems so nice, and you could relate him to like an actual person where you're like, I've known people like who are that nice.
Yeah, that's kind of the stereotype of like the third party candidates in like modern politics, right? Like, just a nice guy who's just like, not really having much to say, but of course that's the stereotype. If you start looking deeper into the politics people. Yeah. Do your research. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
So again, this movie is very relevant in terms of like the even portraying high school politics as a real election.
Sure.
Kind of almost starting to resemble more and more of what the actual politics and elections are looking like. So I think it's interesting on that front.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Very good point. All right. Let's move on to his next film, which is. Because I had it pulled up and I lost it.
About Schmid?
It is actually about Schmid, yeah. Starring the great Jack Nicholson, who in this movie, it's crazy because we usually, I wouldn't say he's officially, is he retired? He's not retired.
I don't know.
But he kind of just hasn't done a movie in forever.
Yeah.
This is one of the movies though where he's still like in his, what year did this come out?
2002.
2002. So he's still like, he's an older Jack Nicholson.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But he's still very much like, a very respectable actor, an actor
definitely.
who always pulls his heart and soul into this movie, and he obviously does in this movie as well. It's pretty much centered around his character, and he's going off to his I think it's daughter's wedding.
Yeah, his daughter's wedding, his only daughter.
And it's mainly about his kind of mental, like, capacity and basically where he's at mentally in his life. So what do you think about this movie? Because you recently watched it.
I watched rewatched it, and it's definitely, this one divides a lot of people even within like the film community, right? Like especially in film school, because even film school nerds are just gonna say, oh, this one's kind of boring. Like it's a little bit slower than most Alexander Payne movie. It's about 2 hours 9 minutes. There's some moments of comedy, of course, and it works a lot in that respect. But I think that a lot of people look at Nicholson's performance, though, and that's the real highlight of this movie, because he, is when you watch Jack Nicholson on screen, you're always expecting the 11, the 11 out of 10, just cranking it all the way up. You know what I mean? And this is by far probably his most subdued performance you're ever going to see out of him, because he's just holding and hiding all this resentment and pain, and you can see it clearly from like scene to scene. And of course those moments come out a little more expressively when kind of talking about the voiceover use and election. They have that whole motif in this movie about like writing letters to the I don't know if it's like the African kid, I don't know if the kid's African, or I don't know what country the kid that he's writing to from, but he basically donated to like one of those like TV commercial deals, like donate to save a kid in Africa. So he just uses that as an excuse to just write letters to
express himself.
Himself. Yeah. So again, we get a lot of those like monologues and moments, but it ultimately becomes so effective that once you see him actually start to interact with people, you're looking and reading his face just to see like those little moments of anguish and pain.
And a lot of it too is on the direction of Alexander Payne's, and the close-ups he does on his face are great in this movie.
Oh, definitely,
like you feel like his little micro expressions that Nicholson is so good at doing.
Right.
He's great at micro expressions.
Oh,
like making
definitely.
Tiny little movements of the face that express to you what he's feeling. And obviously a lot of it is the eyes as well. But that's like the basis of acting, is like it's all in the eyes kind of thing. And Nicholas is obviously great at doing that as well. But it's also like, do you feel like there's a common theme between Alexander Payne's characters? Do you feel like there's a theme that kind of goes, not like they're all the same, but they all kind of have the same kind of like mentality, I guess you can say. I don't know. Do you feel that? Or?
I think he writes very human people, like, and I think in that respect, a lot of his characters harbor a lot of resentment throughout their life, right? So especially in something like this, he's regretting the relationship that he has with his daughter, because that's his only child, and she's kind of escaped him, and now when we get to meet the dude that when he meets the dude that she's marrying, and that and once we get to know this guy, like, he's an idiot, you know what I mean? Like, he's a complete moron. So like, and you know, for him seeing that is like, he kind of feels bad that he wasn't there to kind of guide her path into dating somebody, I guess, respectable.
Sure.
So it's interesting in the respect that you get a lot of deep character moments like that, but even when he's like spending like little stuff, when he's spending time with his friends, or when he's you know, like I said, when he's like writing his letters, you get some real intimate like moments and like deeper understandings of what like he as a character is, his like internal conflicts are just going off the charts. Because remember, there's a great subplot in there where he is retired, like he is forced into retirement basically by his company. And you know, he kind of has to come to terms with, he doesn't, you know, it's not like he's like some legend at his job. He doesn't really have much of a legacy there. Another dude could just come in and replace him, and it'll just be like the exact same. So, you know, he kind of feels a certain way about that, not having left much behind.
Sure.
So.
And he also feels like, obviously, a lot of Alexander Payne movies are about like midlife crisis, but this is more like old man crisis.
Old man crisis,
where
yeah.
you're at that point in life where you're like, man, I'm old.
Yeah.
What have I left behind? What if I die tomorrow? What do I leave behind? Kind of mentality.
Mm-hmm.
Where you're just like, he's questioning like what he's really done with his life, kind of thing, which is obviously an actual thing that people go through when they get older.
Right.
So he's obviously in that moment in his life too. I want to talk a little bit more Jack Nicholson, because obviously, would you put him up there as far as like all timers, as far as great actors?
Oh, top 5.
Top 5.
Yeah.
Well, would you even put him in Mount Rushmore of all timers?
Yeah. I mean, you know why? Because
he carries movies a lot.
Well, even back from like the 60s, right, with Easy Rider, he steals the show in like his very first role.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And ever since then, I mean, I think he's the only actor in history to be nominated for an Oscar in 4 separate decades, right? 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. So like, you know, that's
gnarly.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah. So, you know, a lot of people say, you know, big criticism with Jack Nicholson is that all he does is play angry, right? His only calling card is being angry. But to me, the way he conveys all of these different layers of anger and rage are what make him so fascinating.
Sure.
Like, you watch his performance in something like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and compare that to something like The Shining, two very different styles of acting. Yeah, two very different like ranges and what he's going for. Especially you look at something like this compared to I don't know if it was his next movie, but movie closely to the release of this, Anger Management,
with Adam Sandler.
Yeah, Adam Sandler. Yeah, so you get the big over the top comedic levels, but you get the quiet, silent, subdued Jack Nicholson, and he has the range to kind of carry that throughout his whole filmography. Yeah, and I think that's really, to me, that's the making of a great actor. If you know, you could have like this all time feel and style to your movies, and he's obviously inspired by people like Brando, James Dean, all these classic actors, but he brings that into the modern age.
Yeah, I think it's always an interesting conversation, especially when you have a vet like he is, a veteran in acting, obviously, and you have a director like an Alexander Payne who's known for kind of focusing on characters and making the characters the center focus of all his movies, and the characters' tragedies, because they're kind of tragedies, kind of semi-tragedies, or decisions or bad decisions in life, or moments that they regret, which again comes up in pretty much all his films, I would say, in Alexander Payne's films. So a lot of the success of his movies are finding the right actor, right? Because that's kind of the whole thing, is like finding the right actor to express those kind of emotions.
Right.
And Payne is great at directing actors. Like that's another thing we talked about, Aronofsky being great at directing actors back in our first episode. He's another one, Alexander Payne. I would say he's a great actors director, where he can get performances out of actors that can, you know, carry on throughout their careers. Right. I think so. I mean, he does that in the next few movies as well. But
I think even all of his movies, if I'm not mistaken, I believe, for the exception of Citizen Roof and Election, I think all of his other movies have been nominated for acting categories. Every other film in his filmography has been nominated for an acting category.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Again, that's just a testament to how somebody of his caliber can communicate with these people. And it's also in the writing, right?
Sure.
He writes these really deep and complex characters, that have a lot of like struggles internally, but also have a hard time, frankly, communicating that. I think ultimately that's what this movie is about Schmidt, is like the lack of communication. He doesn't really have anybody to talk to his problems with, so he ends up just kind of talking, mostly to himself. And I think at the end of the movie, which is probably one of the best endings to any Alexander Payne film, when he actually gets a letter back from the little kid that he was donating to, and he reads that letter, and then and he sees the painting that the kid attached to the letter, and he just like starts crying and bawling. And he realizes that even though he's had this hard struggle and he's broken all these relationships, he's lost his job, he's pretty much without anything, but just that one revelation of being able to help one person and to have that one person respond to you back is something that's
and the fact that it's a child too is like that's always one thing too that you can connect to as well.
Right.
I mean, Jack Nicholson to me is crazy, obviously. I think the next one's Sideways.
Sideways, with Paul Giamatti and
Thomas Hayden Church.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was pulling it up, but I lost the page.
Oh, that's good.
Sideways. So with Thomas Hayden Church, Paul Giamatti, another one that I can honestly say, kind of like Election, where I'm just like, I don't know if I like anyone in this movie. I mean, Paul Giamatti is not that likable in some important parts of this movie, and some decision he makes are kind of not likable, I guess is the best way of putting it. But obviously, Paul Giamatti is another guy who's known for his incredible acting. Thomas Hayden Church is a guy who's kind of disappeared, right? I mean, he's not disappeared. He's still around, but he's not making as many movies as he was during like the 2000s period. Because he was in a lot of movies in the 2000s.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
And he's known for, he's a great actor. Like it's not like he's not a great actor, but he just currently hasn't come out with anything in a while. But it's basically about these two guys, and again it comes back to the character focus that Alexander Payne is so good at doing. And this is another one about men, about kind of crisis mentality, going through a crisis. This is another one that it has kind of that common theme, and then obviously bad decisions and having protagonist characters who are questionable as well, because a lot of what Giamatti does is pretty questionable, and same with Thomas Hayden Church. But what do you think about this movie? Sideways is one that's pretty well regarded, right?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people say this is probably his best film, Alexander Payne's best movie, and I think rightfully so. I mean, this film is a buddy comedy. Buddy comedy, buddy road trip. Buddy road trip, exactly. And it funny enough, it has a lot of the tropes that you'll see in a buddy comedy.
Sure.
But except for making those moments, that are supposed to be like over the top and funny that you'll see in a traditional road comedy like Road Trip or anything else, those moments are played instead for dramatic effect or dramatic purposes. And because we understand what each character has at stake, when they start to make bad decisions, it's like, whoa, dude, what are you doing? Particularly with Thomas Hayden Church. When you know he's getting married, and you know that he, that's the whole point is like their bachelor party.
Yeah.
But when he's having that affair with homegirl from
Grey's Anatomy.
Sandra Oh, there we go. Yeah.
I got you, man.
Yeah.
I got you. I know my Asian actress.
Hey, there we go.
She's another one. Where's she been?
Yeah, Grey's Anatomy.
She's great in this movie.
Yeah, is Grey's Anatomy still on air?
I don't know.
Yeah.
You're asking the wrong person. I have no idea.
So for especially something like this, I think it was nominated for a bunch of Oscars. I think it ended up winning something either for screenplay or one of the acting categories or something like that. But all of the performances in this movie are just top notch. When we're talking about performances, but I think thematically it has something really interesting to say about what our perception of romance is supposed to be. Particularly with Paul Giamatti's character, who goes out to this wine country and starts to fall in love with this girl, but he is so hung up on his ex-wife that it's just tearing him apart, and he's starting to use alcohol and wine as a crutch to start to get over that. So when he starts drinking, he starts to say really stupid, idiotic stuff to this girl he really cares about. And it's just interesting the way they explore and dive deep into how each of those characters are influencing one another. throughout. So,
do you feel like it has a lot to say about marriage as well, not just romance but marriage?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's kind of the idea of like denial of marriage, right? Self-denial.
Sure.
Something we see carried over in his past two films. Obviously with Thomas Hayden Church, he is so scared of being tied down and being monogamous that he just wants to take this last weekend just to have like endless amounts of fun,
Yeah.
But in the end, he ends up breaking Sandra Oh's heart, and messing up the relationship with Paul Giamatti and his romantic interest. I can't remember her name either. But and tearing that apart, while also literally breaking his arm and destroying Paul Giamatti's car, just for an excuse to have the broken arm. I just think a lot of that stuff is just the way they approach that. They definitely have. They're definitely poking fun at the idea of like guys having these like last second marriage, kind of breaks. You know what I mean?
Sure.
These last minute cold feet. That's what It's kind of making fun of a lot of that.
Yeah.
And I think it's very poignant. Throughout this film. Who's making the good decisions, who's making the bad decisions, and why are we still rooting for these two to keep going?
Seriously.
Yeah,
personally.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying in me watching this movie. Do you feel like Alexander Payne has a lot to say about marriage in all his movies? I mean, Election comments on it.
About marriage, yeah.
About Schmidt.
Descendants is all about marriage.
It's all about marriage and the disappointments of marriage and the logic or lack of logic behind marriage, the rationality behind marriage,
right?
The concept of monogamy. What do you think Alexander Payne is trying to say about marriage? And because he says it in pretty much all his movies.
Yeah.
What do you think?
No, I mean, I think that I think he's always taken the side of, marriage is essentially the only way a marriage is successful is through communication.
Sure.
But we see a common problem throughout all of his characters is just the inability to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
If Thomas Hayden Church sat down with his fiance and was just like, hey, I just kind of want to, I don't know if I'm ready to. I mean, he tells Paul Giamatti all this stuff. He's not ready. Like, he's not ready to get married. He's kind of rushing into it. And if he sat down and told his fiance that, he probably wouldn't be in that situation,
sure.
and he wouldn't be crying in his hotel room, like begging for forgiveness. You know what I mean?
And it's like the concept of like you rather do something stupid in private than how do I say this? Than be honest in public.
Yeah,
I guess you can say, right?
Right.
Where it's like you're so like nervous / shy / scared of what your fiance might say that you're just like, oh, I don't know if she's gonna react well, and then you do something that's way worse.
Right.
That it's like, dude, you're worried about a reaction when you're over here cheating on your wife. Basically, is what it is, right?
Right.
And it's that concept of like, it comes down to socialness, right? Sociology, where it's like the social relationship that you have with one person versus the private relationship you have with yourself, right? What you do in your private self and in your private head and your thoughts and all that thing. So communicating, breaking down yourself in a way that you can communicate every single portion of your being is so difficult for anyone, especially a dude, right? Where it's like a guy doesn't want to say how they're feeling because they're like taught to not express their feelings.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like a more scathing look at masculinity in this movie, right? How is like masculinity affecting these two's ability to like find romance and find love, and
their misinterpretation of it,
right. Yeah, exactly. And
to the point of like the destruction of their lives.
Right.
Like we see in Election too.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, again, if these people were able to kind of talk to each other and find some acknowledgement in the fact that, Paul Giamatti's character does have a problem with alcoholism. Thomas Hayden Church's character obviously has like sex problem, sexually, like almost like a sex addict, right? Because he even mentions like that's not the first time he cheated on his fiance in this movie. So there's a lot of layers to the way the characters in this movie are forced to interact with the environment around them. I think this movie's also brilliant just on the fact that it's set in like this beautiful wine country in California, with like these great like long shots of like the wine field, the wine farms, and all of this stuff. And again, the whole idea of the use of music, like how it has that like little like tone of like European, like Italian, French, like kind of style. Real music is really nice, and I think it fits with the like the elegance of like the tone they're trying to go for.
Sure.
And then meanwhile you have Paul Giamatti's character, Paul Giamatti just kind of being like this schmuck who's trying to fit into that, and he obviously has a lot of knowledge about wine tasting, but it's he's dealing with his own self,
and it comes back to like how a break in your life or in your expression or your whether it's marriage or midlife crisis or personal crisis or whatever it is, how it takes something so extravagant and how it takes like a break for you to suddenly be like, oh shit, I need help, right. Or like, oh shit, I should have gotten myself together. Where it takes so much extremities for these guys to like snap out of it, and they can't snap out of it, especially Thomas Hayden Church's character, where he's just like stuck in this cycle that he's in,
right?
And he's so afraid to communicate in the sense of to his fiance that he'd rather be like stuck like this,
right? And the whole usage of wine too, like it being something that's made from a fruit that the fruit has to literally expire and get old and rotten just to start being consumed. And that's kind of what they're saying. Like these dudes are getting old. They're kind of, for lack of a better terms, like deteriorating.
I was going to say disintegrating, but yeah,
I was going to say disintegrating. I was like, that's not the right word. I can't say that.
It isn't the right word.
Yeah, deteriorating. So they're like, they're deteriorating mentally. Yeah. So I'm like, and wine's kind of like the metaphor for that too, right? Like, they have to get old and bitter and they're trying to find new life.
Sure.
And like their life cycle, and as wine gets older, it starts to get better too. So I think that's kind of like another, you're
analogy.
talking about the midlife crisis analogy is like the lifespan of wine is literally like dying or growing and getting rotten and dying out, and then being rebirthed and repurposed into something new.
Yeah.
So I think that's what like a midlife crisis is like. You have to kind of go through that period to kind of find yourself and rediscover yourself and get back up on top. So,
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's jump over to his most recent film, Nebraska.
Descendants?
I'm sorry, Descendants.
Yeah.
Descendants. My bad. My train of thought, I'm losing it. I'm disintegrating.
Yeah.
My mind is disintegrating. Descendants, starring George Clooney. This is another one a lot about marriage, a lot about relationship between your daughter. Again, running themes with Mr. Alexander Payne.
Yeah. The guy needs to talk to his wife.
Yo, this guy needs to chill.
Yeah.
But obviously, this is another one that gives a great performance to George Clooney. Probably one of his best performances.
Yeah.
Honestly, one of George Clooney's best performances, in my opinion.
Put
Shailene Woodley on the map, bro.
Yeah.
Straight up.
Yeah.
This is the one. I would say this is the movie that made her go into the Divergent movies and start to get even popular off that. But and then this is also one that got her cast as Mary Jane. In the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man that never came to be.
Completely cut out of that.
Completely cut out of that movie, yeah. But she got a name off of this, and George Clooney gave a great performance off of this. But basically, the whole concept is like, it's tragedy on top of tragedy, and it's the juxtaposition of experiencing hell on paradise, right? Where it's like you're experiencing something so awful and terrible in a location that's supposed to be an expression or a definition of like joy and peace and tranquility, which is Hawaii, right? So basically, it's his wife going through this and then discovering the affair that he had with she had. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
With freaking what's his face?
I forget the guy's name.
Shaggy, not Shaggy.
I know who you're talking about. I don't know the actor's name, but
I'll find it.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, it's strange, right? Like
he played Shaggy in the Scooby-Doo movies, which is why I called him Shaggy.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, he has. I mean, it's a great film because it really does explore like this kind of gray area that you could almost never think of, right? Like your wife just died, but after she dies, you discover she was cheating on you.
Yeah. That's what's it's a tragic situation. and then only added by another tragic situation.
Right. So it's like it's you getting multiple levels of like grief, but then also like, yo, what happened? Where did I go missing? Like and all that stuff. So so when he actually is like on the search for this dude and trying to get some answers about what was happening with his wife, and why didn't he know about this? And again, it was like his wife was too scared to tell him about it. And as Shailene Woodley's character explains, it was like she just thought it was going to be a short-term thing, but then it grew into something a little bit more and a little bit more. And ultimately we find out that his wife was actually about to leave George Clooney, apparently. So it's very like touching and heartbreaking in a way that like your family, like his daughters is all he has left, but they knew about this situation before he did. Mm-hmm. So how is he going to reason with that now? Mm-hmm. So I don't know. This movie has a lot of layers to it,
but it's also about that kind of masculine perspective, that fatherly / husband perspective of like dealing with an issue of your family, which is the most personal thing you can deal with,
right?
And dealing with something that's tragic, which is basically, like you said, like death mixed with affair, mixed with cheating. Mm-hmm. Two things that are like the most awful things that a guy can deal with, right? Especially in a relationship and in a marriage. And the fact that he has daughters instead of sons, and all the concept between the age that George Clooney is in, the age that Giamatti is in, the age that Thomas Hayden Church, the age of Matthew Broderick's character, all kind of running theme of this kind of this certain age that you reach when you start to, how do you deal with tragic or depressing situations when you're kind of a middle-aged man.
Right. I mean, it's funny. I think in this movie, his problems aren't even like the traditional, just like boredom. Like he loves his life the way he was living it for the most part. And he was under the assumption that he had a good family, good life going. But then after discovering all this stuff, it becomes more of a journey of self-rediscovery, right? Where did he go wrong? Where was he missing the steps and all the signs of his wife having this affair and all of that business? So, I mean, there's other great moments in this movie too, like Shailene Woodley's boyfriend. I can't remember the character's name, but he has some, when him and George Clooney will like kind of like interact, and he had that whole thing where when George Clooney like punched him in the mouth, that was hilarious. There's a lot of like really funny and comedic scenes. I think it was nominated that year, the Golden Globe, for the comedy category, which it is quite funny. It's quite a funny movie.
It's always interesting to see the Golden Globe nominations for comedy, but that's a whole nother podcast.
We can talk about that. But, I definitely think that this movie.
Would you say this is his best movie for you? What's your favorite?
I'd probably say like Sideways is probably still there, or Election. But this movie definitely has.
This is probably his most popular.
Yeah, it's definitely. And going back to this is his most commercial movie.
Yeah.
This movie was nominated for the most Oscars out of all of his.
And
movies.
It has some pretty memorable shots.
Yeah.
In the movie, like the Shane Lee shot when she's
underwater.
Pool.
Yeah.
When she's underwater.
And definitely, I mean, it has, it kind of almost consciously or unconsciously, maybe didn't like start it, but kind of brought a new wave to putting movies in Hawaii, right? Like this.
Okay.
Yeah, like the whole what was the one that with Emma Stone where she played the Asian.
Oh yeah,
chick?
Aloha State.
Yeah, Aloha. That's what it's called. Yeah, okay. Aloha. Set in Hawaii. I guess there's movies that were set in Hawaii before, but like this, like I don't know. For some reason, for me, I started noticing there's like an uptick of like different kinds of movies, I guess, set in Hawaii. But there were, this movie, it explores the side of Hawaii that we don't see a lot, like the actual family home. Mm-hmm. A lot of times when we see Hawaii, we're familiar with Honolulu but I think this one is set on the main island, so the main island of Hawaii. So you get like a lot of the homes and the landscape and like the architecture of like the family structure there.
And the people who are living there.
Yeah,
versus
the culture.
People visiting there.
Right, exactly.
I think that's what you're trying to
right? Yeah, the people who are living there and the people who exactly. So, for them living in Hawaii, it's just always having that vibe, you know what I mean? Like we kind of talk about how, for us it represents the peace and tranquility, visually, but when you actually watch for these characters, that's just home. You know what I mean? That's just the constant state they're living in. That's why you don't see a lot of people in this movie get angry or have these big outbursts. Everybody's just kind of chilled and laid back because
it's so crazy how like that's really is a Hawaiian culture. How like everyone in Hawaii like speaks slower apparently, and how they're kind of like always kind of chilled out.
Yeah.
Because you grew up in Hawaii. When you grow up in Hawaii, your outlook and your personality is like so different. Like you imagine like someone from Hawaii versus someone like in New York or something like that. Like the contrast between the two is so different.
Right.
It's interesting. Right. It's interesting that they kind of stay true to that in this movie. For sure. Any other thoughts on this sentence?
No, it's a great. I mean, this is one of his more recent ones, and like I said, got a lot of Oscar attention.
It did. It got a lot of Oscar attention. I think
it even won another screenplay win for Mr. Payne here. So.
Let's go to his most recent film. The reason why I'm kind of trudging along is just in case we want to take some of your guys' questions.
Right.
Nebraska, which is his most recent film, which Bruce Dern. Bruce Dern, all in black and white. Also starring, what's his freaking name?
Bob Odenkirk in this, William Forte.
Will Forte, who I know from SNL.
Yeah. Ken Knapsack's
Doppelganger. This one it's interesting because it's all black and white, which is a very extremely bold choice. Which my friend and I were at work where we were talking about Alexander Payne, and we were talking about Nebraska and how like he apparently fought for it to be in black and white, and he really wanted it to be in black and white, and how black and white can like just making a movie in black and white can already express so much. If you know what I mean, like it can really dictate a perception of a movie. Where it's like if I see a trailer for a movie and I see that it's in black and white, half of me is interested, half of me is like I'm not gonna watch that. You know what I'm saying?
Right,
like black and white can give you so much, even just by just making it that. But basically, this movie is it's called Nebraska, set in Nebraska, and it's funny because Alexander Payne, being from Nebraska, he can give the best interpretation of what Nebraska is, kind of like we saw with Greta Gerwig in Sacramento,
right?
Because she's from Sacramento and Lady Bird is set in Sacramento, so we get a very realistic version of Sacramento.
Well, even if I don't know if you've seen Frances Han, the one that she wrote, directed by Noah Baumbach. But that one, it's mostly set in New York, but there's that whole sequence when she goes back to California. I think it was either Sacramento or San Francisco. But like there's a whole like beautiful like 10-minute sequence of her just like being at home with family and then like and just coming back. So again, the location that these people are from plays such a big role into their filmmaking.
And the knowledge of the filmmakers the knowledge that the filmmaker has on the location is also very important.
Yeah.
And that's what makes Nebraska great about Alexander Payne's movie. But basically one of my favorite moments in the Schmoes Know live show is when we had Brett and his mom talk about this movie. Right. Remember that?
Yeah.
They reviewed this movie, and then Brett is from Nebraska.
Yeah.
Brett, that would have been awesome to have him on this podcast.
That would have,
because he's the most Nebraska dude ever.
Yeah.
And this filmmaker is the most Nebraska dude ever.
Yeah.
So having those two perspectives is pretty interesting. But hearing his perspective is actually pretty cool because he said it's like spot on.
Yeah.
Is what he said about the movie.
You know, it's funny too because as I watch the movie, I laugh because I just think these are like caricatures, like a cartoon, you know, like the way these characters are talking to each other and acting with each other. But then like hearing somebody like Brett, who's actually from Nebraska,
being like, no, that's 100% real.
Yeah.
And I'm like, really?
Yeah. And it's just a different dynamic. Again, a lot of times when filmmakers make movies about the Midwest, it's very like making fun of it. But you could tell Alexander Payne legitimately loves the people he's around, and like these, and especially like the older gentlemen, the elderly people. I mean, you know, Bruce Dern has some of the best lines in this movie.
Yeah. Wasn't he nominated for it?
He was nominated. Okay. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And this was kind of, you know, talking about bringing actors out. This is kind of the big comeback for Bruce Dern, right? And then after this, we saw him in Hateful Eight. And I don't know if he's doing any other major things, but he's great in this movie. And, you know, part of the greatness is just the quiet of it, right? Like he's just, you know, the idea that this dude had like thinks he's won the lottery, so he has to collect this prize, and he's go telling the town, and the whole town's like rallying behind him, and old families trying to come in to start asking for money. I think all of it is just like really good and smart, and like really digging into the home of the Midwest.
Sure. So. It's also a lot about the relationship between like an older parents and an older son, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's always comes down to age, mm-hmm. and the fact that he's like dealing with your parents being older and you being older, and the kind of dynamic that you have between the relationship of your parents when you're younger, and how so much changes or nothing changes, that kind of whole concept of like relationships, and how the relationship between parents and son or parents and daughter can be kind of the same when you get older, or even completely different when you get older. So I think that's also an interesting thing that he touches upon in this movie.
Yeah.
Do you like that it's in black and white? Do you feel like it gives a lot of value to the movie?
Well, yeah, I think it adds like a level of authenticity to it, right? Mm-hmm. Like if it's a very simple movie, very simple in terms of like having the characters that's portraying and the people that they're talking about, and the time, set in modern times, but it feels like a classic drama, like classic melodrama. So I think having a film in black and white like this definitely, like you said, establishes the tone that they're going for.
Yeah.
It's not going to be like this big over the top stylistic cliche. It's taking out every single aspect of, directing, just focusing on the characters and the actors and the story.
And it's a very small cast too, which
June Squibb, is that,
mm-hmm.
is that, yeah, she's in this as well. The way it implements these people, Bob Odenkirk's in this too.
Yep.
Like all of these characters play such a vulnerable, but almost to the point of like transparency. You know what I mean? So it's like, you're getting a very stripped back, laid back, kind of version of these people who will just tell you who they are, and right from the get go. So I think that's what makes it so fascinating. Again, somebody who's never been to Nebraska, this is like a nice window into like the Nebraskan lifestyle, I'm guessing. So that's pretty dope.
I watched one of our listeners is from Nebraska being like, "Yo, what are you guys talking about? It's nothing like I don't know. I'm just going off what Brett said, and Brett's the most authentic Nebraska guy I've ever met.
Oh so. Yeah, definitely.
Like he's legit Nebraskan.
Yeah.
Any last word on Nebraska before we jump into questions?
No, I'm excited to see his next film. Of course, Downsizing.
Downsizing's his next one. Unfortunately, we haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
But eventually we will. Let's see if we have any questions. So far right now, Lawrence says, just a comment, I guess. He says, living in Hawaii is better than Nebraska. Okay, cool. Good to know. And he says, Tracy Flick is probably working for Trump. Thoughts, RB3. Thoughts.
That's very possible. That's very possible. I think, especially somebody like Tracy Fleck, who is so overly, almost to the point.
It's funny because you equated her to Hillary, and right now this guy is like, nah, bro, she's working for Trump.
Now, listen, what Tracy, when I compare her to Clinton, I'm really comparing her to like establishment.
I know what you're saying.
You know what I mean?
I'm totally messing with you.
So people are gonna, of course, those same people who are just so hungry to get to the top and ready to get the places of power, they're gonna be working for these kinds of people, right?
Yeah.
So I just think it's funny that. And again, you see her hanging out with politicians.
Sure.
I don't know if it's necessarily for the right reasons or not, but I guess that's left to be seen. But
sure.
Yeah, she definitely. I don't know. I don't know if she'd be working for. I don't know if Trump even hires women. I don't know.
Of course she does.
The Trump supporters are gonna.
No, I mean he has a ton of women. He has a freaking press secretary, whatever her name is, and then he has the. I forget their names. Huckabee.
The education lady?
Yeah, no, not education. Press.
Yeah. I know
press.
what you're talking about. Yeah. No good either. So, you kind of want. I don't want to get the political. I'm sorry.
I love how you're like, never mind.
Yeah,
you literally said nothing in a minute because you're just like, nah, man, I'm not gonna talk about it.
I want to take away like 50% of our audience. You know what I mean? Like.
No, but it's interesting to see the political perspective because there's always a different political perspective on different issues and stuff, and personalities and how different personalities can match different perspectives. I don't know. I'm kind of with. I watch a lot of SNL, so I'm kind of with Michael Shea when he's just like both sides suck.
Yeah,
Democrats, you guys suck too.
Yeah,
we're all the same. No, we're all just politicians, and you guys are all just shady anyways.
Yeah.
And with that, that's our podcast for Alexander Payne. It's the best ending to a podcast. We love you guys, whether you're on the right or you're on the left. We love you. We love America all the way.
Let's not make it great again.
Let's don't take away our guns. But anyways, guys, make sure you guys leave us a comment. Let us know what you guys think. Let us know what filmmakers you want to see. Obviously, we're doing Miyazaki eventually. Obviously, we're gonna do a PTA. Obviously, we're gonna do a Nolan. And then who's another guy that I keep hearing about?
Tarantino. We're
gonna get a Tarantino one eventually. Yeah. But we want to hear from your guys' thoughts on this filmmaker, thoughts on the conversation, thoughts on what do you guys think of what Alexander Payne is trying to say. Let us know on Facebook. Let us know what kind of things you would want to hear in this podcast besides just filmmakers. What kind of perspectives would you like to hear, or what kind of ways that we can get you interacted in this podcast? Because we're new, we're learning, but we always like hearing from you guys, and we respect you guys, and we appreciate you guys listening every week.
Yeah. And get ready for the Ryan Johnson episode
next week. We're doing Ryan Johnson.
So you better watch Brick. Everybody has to watch Brick.
And by Brick, he means Last Jedi. If you guys want to check out a small indie movie, it's called The Last Jedi. It's as indie as Brick.
Same budget,
Same budget as Brick. Yeah. But anyways, guys, we're going to do a Ryan Johnson episode next week. So that means we're going to be talking about Looper and Brick. And obviously, we're going to give you guys a Last Jedi review. So make sure you guys watch that movie before you watch our podcast, because I'm sure you're not thinking about watching that movie at all.